We promised not to fall in love, just to stay friends. It sounded easy back then. We were 12, sitting under the mango tree behind my grandmother's house, with sticky fingers from the popsicles we'd bought with our lunch money. No dating, no crushes, no drama, until university is over, he said, grinning like he always did when he thought he was being clever. I laughed and agreed. It was simple, harmless, and safe. After all, he was my best friend. Years passed, and that promise became something like a secret oath between us. Through every heartbreak we watched others go through, every teenage rumor that floated down the school hallways, we just smiled and reminded each other, not us. We were the steady ones. The pair everyone teased but secretly admired. The girl and boy who shared everything but never crossed that invisible line. But life has a funny way of testing promises made in innocence. It started with a school trip, nothing special, just a weekend at a lakeside cabin, the kind where teachers think students will learn about nature and teamwork. The sky had been clear all morning, sunlight bouncing off the water like scattered diamonds. We were laughing about something stupid, something only we would find funny, when the first drop of rain landed on his cheek. He looked up, confused, and then, it poured. Everyone ran for cover, but the nearest shelter was already full. The only option left was an old wooden rowboat tied to the dock. He grabbed my hand without a second thought and pulled me in, just as thunder rolled across the sky. I remember how the air smelled, wet wood, rain, and a hint of his cologne, faint but warm. The lake rippled around us, silver and alive, while the rain turned the world into a blur of sound and movement. We sat close, knees brushing, the kind of closeness that makes your heart beat a little faster even when you try to act normal. He laughed, brushing water from his hair, and that's when I really saw him, not the boy who shared his lunch with me, not the friend who walked me home every day, but someone else. Someone I'd never noticed before. The way the rain clung to his eyelashes, the softness in his voice when he said my name, it all felt different. And then he said it. Quietly, almost lost in the rain. Ava, what if we didn't keep the promise? My heart stopped. The sound of the rain faded, and all I could hear was my own breath catching in my throat. I wanted to laugh, to remind him it was just a joke from childhood, but the look in his eyes told me it wasn't. He wasn't teasing. He meant it. That was the moment everything changed, the promise, the friendship, and the way I saw him. The rain didn't just fall that day. It washed away the line we swore we'd never cross. We grew up on the same street, me and Noah. His house was the one with the broken mailbox and the giant orange cat that liked to sleep on the hood of his dad's old car. Mine was 2 doors down, with a front porch that creaked whenever someone stepped on the third plank. We were neighbors before we were anything else, and maybe that's why everything between us felt so natural, like breathing. Noah was the kind of boy who climbed trees higher than anyone else dared, who always skinned his knees but never seemed to mind. He raced bicycles like he was training for the Olympics, and when I fell behind, which was often, he'd always stop, turn around, and wait with that teasing grin. "Come on, Ava," he'd say, "you'll never beat me at this speed." I'd roll my eyes, push harder, and somehow we'd both end up laughing so hard we forgot who won. That was Noah, always patient, always steady, always there. Our parents used to joke that we were practically siblings. We had matching lunchboxes when we were little, matching bruises from our adventures, even matching scoldings when we stayed out too late. Somewhere along the line, our family started saying we'd end up together one day, and every time they did, we'd both make a face and say, "Ew, no way," as if the thought was impossible. Back then, it really did feel that way, impossible. When high school ended, everything changed and yet somehow stayed the same. The graduation caps were tossed into the air, and life stretched out in front of us like a road we couldn't see the end of. That summer was full of long walks, late-night talks, and that bittersweet feeling that comes with growing up. Some of our friends started dating, some moved away, some started pretending they were adults already. But not us. We stayed the same, the pair everyone joked about but secretly admired for how close we were without ever crossing that line. Then one night, sitting on the hood of his dad's car under a sky full of stars, we made that promise, the one that would define everything that came after. "Let's not date anyone," he said suddenly, tossing a pebble into the street. "At least not until university's done." I laughed at first, thinking he was joking, but he was serious. He said he didn't want anything to mess up what we had, no drama, no heartbreak, no distractions. "Just you and me, okay? Friends. Always." I agreed without thinking twice. It sounded simple, easy, and honestly, I didn't want anything to change either. We shook on it, sealing the pact with a smile and a soda can toast. Noah had always been the confident one, the one who made plans and followed through. I was the quiet one, the overthinker who needed time to catch up. He called me his anchor, I called him my storm. Somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. When I panicked before exams, he made me laugh. When he doubted himself, I reminded him how capable he was. Our friendship was a rhythm, steady, familiar, safe. But looking back now, I wonder if we were fooling ourselves even then. Because the truth is, I can't remember a single moment of my life that didn't have Noah in it. Every birthday, every bad day, every secret, he was there. And maybe that's where the danger began, quietly and slowly, like water rising behind a dam. He had that kind of smile that made people trust him instantly. Girls noticed him, a lot. They liked the way his hair fell into his eyes when he laughed, the way he carried his guitar like it was part of him. Sometimes they'd whisper about him in class, and I'd roll my eyes, pretending not to care. But deep down, I felt something strange, something I couldn't name yet. I told myself it was just protectiveness. After all, he was my best friend, nothing more. The summer before university, we spent almost every day together. Mornings at the lake, evenings on the porch, talking about everything and nothing. He'd tell me about his dreams of becoming an architect, about how he wanted to build something that lasted. I told him I wanted to write stories that made people feel seen. He said that was fitting, because I always noticed things other people didn't. Sometimes, when the sun was setting and the light turned everything gold, I'd catch him looking at me in a way I couldn't quite read. It wasn't romantic, not exactly, just different. Like he was seeing me for the first time and didn't know what to do with that feeling. I never mentioned it. Maybe I didn't want to. We thought our promise was a shield, something that would keep us safe from the chaos of love. But promises like that don't last forever. Sooner or later, something, or someone, comes along to test them. And for us, that test came with the sound of rain, the smell of the lake, and the quiet beating of two hearts that had been in sync for far too long to pretend otherwise. University life pulled us in different directions, but somehow, that bond, the one Noah and I built over years of shared laughter and quiet understanding, stayed strong. We didn't see each other every day anymore. His classes were across campus, and mine were buried deep in the humanities building that always smelled like old books and coffee. But even with different schedules, different friends, and different lives, there was always us, that invisible thread that kept tugging us back together. We texted between lectures, sent each other memes that no one else would find funny, and met up whenever we could, sometimes just for a quick coffee or a late-night walk to clear our heads. It wasn't dramatic or romantic. It was steady. Familiar. A quiet comfort in a world that suddenly felt too big and too fast. He'd call me after long nights working on his architecture projects, his voice tired but calm, and I'd stay on the phone while writing my essays, neither of us saying much, just existing together in the same silence. Sometimes, I'd catch myself smiling at something small he said. A habit. A word. The way he still called me kid, like we were still those two teenagers racing bikes through the rain. And then I'd shake it off, reminding myself it didn't mean anything. It couldn't. We had a promise. And yet, somewhere beneath all the normal, something small was shifting. Slowly. Quietly. Like sunlight sneaking into a room through a crack in the curtain. Then came the announcement for the annual school trip, a weekend by the lake, just like the ones we used to dream about when we were younger. The idea of spending 2 days away from deadlines and noise felt like a relief. Everyone was excited, planning outfits and playlists. I wasn't sure if Noah would even go. He'd been busy lately, working on a big design project. But when I saw his name on the list, I smiled without meaning to. The morning of the trip, the sky was impossibly clear, blue like polished glass, the kind of day that made you forget worries and promises alike. Students gathered by the buses, laughing, dragging their suitcases, and shouting last-minute reminders. I was half awake, sipping from a cup of too hot coffee, when I saw him walking toward me through the crowd. Same easy stride, same messy hair, but something about him looked different. More grown up, maybe. Or maybe it was just me seeing him differently for the first time. He grinned when he saw me. "You saved me a seat, right?" I pretended to roll my eyes. "You're late. You might have to stand the whole way." He laughed, that familiar, effortless laugh that always disarmed me. He climbed onto the bus and sat across the aisle, turning his head just enough to keep me in his line of sight. For most of the ride, we talked the way we always did, trading jokes, teasing each other, ignoring the world around us. But every now and then, I'd catch his gaze, and for a second too long, neither of us would look away. It was nothing. Or at least, that's what I told myself. But when the bus hit a bump and our hands brushed, something small and electric moved through me. My heart skipped, just once, but it was enough to notice. Enough to make me glance out the window and pretend I was fine. The lake came into view just before noon, wide, still, and glistening under the sunlight. The cabins were tucked between rows of tall pine trees, their shadows dancing across the water. It was the kind of place that made everything feel quieter, softer, more alive. As we stepped off the bus, a breeze drifted across the shore, carrying the scent of wet leaves and distant rain. We unpacked, joked around, took pictures. It all felt easy, light-hearted, the kind of happiness that sneaks up on you. But every now and then, I'd catch myself watching Noah. The way he helped others carry their bags, the way he looked when he was lost in thought, staring out at the water like he was remembering something. And maybe I was remembering too, all the years, all the laughter, all the promises we made under that mango tree when we were still kids who didn't know what love felt like. That evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees and the lake turned gold, he caught my eye again. He didn't say anything, just smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't meant for anyone else. And for a fleeting moment, I felt that flutter again, small, soft, but undeniable. I told myself it was just the setting, the nostalgia, the magic of being away from reality. But deep down, I knew something had begun to shift between us. Something fragile and frightening, like the moment before rain, calm, but heavy with everything waiting to fall. That afternoon, the weather turned without warning. One minute the lake was calm, glassy and gold under the lazy sunlight, and the next, the wind started to twist across the water, scattering ripples like shattered glass. The laughter from the other students echoed faintly before being swallowed by the rumble of distant thunder. It happened so suddenly that it almost didn't feel real, like the universe had flipped a switch, changing the entire mood of the day in a heartbeat. We had been sitting by the dock, legs dangling over the edge, talking about nothing and everything. Noah had just finished telling me about some wild dream he'd had, something about building a house that floated on clouds, when the first drop of rain hit my arm. I looked up, squinting at the sky that had turned from bright blue to a dull gray in what felt like seconds. He grinned, teasing. "Don't tell me you're scared of a little water." I laughed, but before I could answer, the downpour began. Sheets of rain pounded the lake, blurring everything into silver. Around us, everyone started shouting and running for cover, the cabins, the mess hall, anywhere dry. The docks suddenly looked too narrow, too crowded, and before I could decide where to go, Noah grabbed my wrist. "Come on." He pulled me toward the boats lined along the edge, his hand warm despite the cold rain. We stumbled into the nearest one, a small wooden rowboat, the kind meant for calm afternoons, not sudden storms. The wind whipped my hair into my face, and I couldn't stop laughing. It was chaotic and ridiculous, but somehow, it felt like the only place in the world we were supposed to be. The rain didn't let up. It poured harder, soaking us within seconds. Water pooled at the bottom of the boat, splashing against our legs. My jeans clung to my skin, my hair stuck to my cheeks, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt so alive. Noah tried to shield me with his arm, which only made me laugh harder. "You're useless at this," I said through the noise. "Hey, at least I tried," he shouted back, his grin wide, eyes gleaming with that same playful spark I'd known since childhood. Lightning flashed in the distance, followed by thunder that shook the air around us. But even then, I wasn't scared. Not of the rain, not of the storm. What scared me was the way I felt, the way his laughter blended with the rain, the way our eyes met and stayed locked a moment too long. The world around us was a blur, but he was crystal clear. There was something about the way the rain softened everything, the sound, the air, even my thoughts. I watched him wipe water from his brow, his shirt clinging to his chest, his hair dripping into his eyes. I'd seen him 1,000 times before, but not like this. Not in a moment that felt stolen from reality. He looked at me then, his expression caught somewhere between amusement and something quieter, something deeper. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just the rain, the sound of our breath, and the quiet hum of something unspoken hanging between us. Then he reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair away from my face. His hand lingered, just long enough for me to feel the warmth beneath the cold. And that was when I knew. It wasn't just friendship anymore. It hadn't been for a long time. My heart raced so fast it almost drowned out the thunder. I tried to look away, to laugh it off, to say something, anything, but my voice caught in my throat. He didn't speak either, just watched me, his eyes searching for something I couldn't name. In that tiny boat, in the middle of a storm, the world felt like it had stopped moving. There was no promise anymore, no pact, no line between us. Just two people who'd spent their whole lives pretending not to feel what they were feeling now. And then it hit me, not just the rain, not just the fear of what this meant, but the truth. That we'd built our friendship on the safety of pretending, and now that pretense was gone. The thunder rolled again, closer this time, echoing through the mountains. I should have felt cold, but I didn't. My whole body felt like it was burning from the inside out. Noah laughed softly, shaking his head as if trying to chase away the tension. "We really picked the worst hiding spot," he said. I smiled, but it came out shaky. "Maybe the best one," I whispered, though I wasn't sure he heard me over the storm. Because even as the rain poured harder, soaking everything we were, I knew something irreversible had happened. The boat might have been small, but in that moment, it held the weight of 1,000 unsaid words, and one truth I couldn't deny anymore. I had fallen for him. And there was no going back. He stopped rowing and looked at me, really looked. The sound of the rain faded in that instant, as if the whole world had gone quiet just to make room for the silence stretching between us. Water ran down his face, dripping from his hair, tracing his jaw like tears that weren't his. His eyes, deep, steady, and searching, held mine with a weight I'd never felt before. It wasn't curiosity or confusion. It was something raw, something real, and it terrified me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. The lake rocked gently beneath us, the oars floating beside his knees, forgotten. Every drop of rain seemed to echo against the wood, small and rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock counting down to something inevitable. Then he spoke, his voice barely audible through the storm. "What if we're breaking our promise, for real?" The words hit harder than any thunder. They weren't just a question, they were a confession. A line being crossed in slow motion. And even though I'd known this moment was coming, ever since that first flutter on the bus, that first spark in the rain, I wasn't ready for it. My heart stumbled, like it didn't know whether to leap forward or run away. I wanted to laugh it off, to remind him how ridiculous it sounded, to throw a joke over the growing ache in my chest. But nothing came out. My voice stayed trapped somewhere behind the pounding of my heart and the taste of rain on my lips. He waited, his eyes never leaving mine. There was no teasing in them, no playful grin like before. Just quiet honesty, and fear. The same fear that was clawing at me from the inside. Because he knew, just like I did, that whatever we said next would change everything. I looked down, at the small waves rippling against the boat, trying to find words that didn't exist. I thought about the years, the laughter, the late nights, the promise we made when love still seemed like something far away. I thought about how safe he made me feel, how easy it was to be around him, how much of my life had his fingerprints on it. And I thought about what it would mean to lose that. If I said yes, we'd break the one thing that had kept us together all these years. If I said no, I'd have to pretend I hadn't already fallen for him, quietly, slowly, and completely. Either way, the world we knew was slipping through our fingers. He leaned forward slightly, the boat tilting with his movement. "Ava," he said, softer now, "say something." I looked up then, and that was my mistake. Because the moment our eyes met again, I knew I couldn't lie. Not to him. Not anymore. Every feeling I'd buried, every emotion I'd tried to laugh off, every glance that lasted too long, it was all there, reflected in his eyes like the truth I'd been running from. I wanted to say no, to protect what we had, to hold on to the safety of the friendship that had been my anchor for so long. But my eyes betrayed me before my words could. Because they told him yes. He saw it. I knew he did. His breath caught, and for a heartbeat, neither of us moved. The world outside the boat was chaos, wind, rain, thunder, but inside, everything was still. Time felt suspended, like even the storm was holding its breath for us. When he reached out, his hand trembled. Just slightly, but enough for me to notice. He brushed his fingers against mine, hesitant at first, as if asking for permission without words. And even though my mind screamed that this was wrong, that we were crossing a line we couldn't uncross, my hand didn't pull away. It stayed. And in that touch, everything we'd ever been, friends, partners in laughter, each other's safe place, turned into something else entirely. Something dangerous, but beautiful. He smiled, a small, broken smile. "Guess we're both terrible at keeping promises," he whispered. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, though I wasn't sure if it was from the rain or from everything I'd been holding in. I wanted to tell him I was scared. That I didn't know how to be anything but his best friend. That love, real love, might destroy the very thing that had kept us alive for so long. But instead, I just nodded, a tiny, trembling nod that said everything words couldn't. He let out a shaky breath and leaned back, eyes still locked on mine. Neither of us spoke again. There was nothing left to say. The storm around us roared on, but it didn't matter anymore. Because the real storm, the one inside us, had already begun. We drifted closer, the sound of rain softening against the lake. The storm had quieted to a whisper, the wind losing its edge as if exhausted by its own fury. The world around us felt still, suspended somewhere between calm and chaos, like even nature was holding its breath, waiting to see what we would do next. The oars floated beside us, forgotten. The boat rocked gently, the water sighing against its sides in slow, rhythmic waves. My heart matched the rhythm, uneven, uncertain, too loud in my chest. Noah sat across from me, soaked to the bone, rain sliding down his neck, his shirt clinging to his shoulders. His hair dripped into his eyes, and for a moment, he looked younger, like the boy I'd grown up with, not the man sitting in front of me now. But there was something in his gaze that was different. Deeper. He wasn't hiding behind jokes or half-smiles anymore. He was looking at me like I was something he'd spent years trying not to see, and finally, he couldn't look away. He reached out, slow and unsure, and brushed a raindrop from my cheek. His fingers were cold, but the touch sent warmth rushing through me, spreading like wildfire under my skin. I froze, not because I didn't want it, but because I did, too much. My breath caught, the world narrowing down to that single moment, that single touch. Then, in a voice barely louder than the rain, he said, "Ava, I don't care about the promise anymore." He paused, his hand still resting against my face. "I care about you." The words hung in the air, heavy and soft all at once. For a second, I didn't understand them. Or maybe I just didn't want to. Because once I did, there would be no going back, no pretending that what we had was just friendship wrapped in nostalgia. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My mind was spinning, memories flooding in all at once. The first day we met, the first time he waited for me when I fell behind, the late nights, the laughter, the shared secrets whispered under streetlights. It all came rushing back like waves crashing against a shore I'd been trying to keep dry. And beneath it all, there had always been this, quiet, patient, waiting. He moved closer, just enough that I could see the raindrops caught on his lashes, the faint tremor in his jaw as if he was holding back everything he'd never said. My heart felt like it was trying to tear its way out of my chest. I wanted to stop him. I wanted to tell him that we couldn't, that we'd lose everything, the friendship, the safety, the years we'd built. But before I could breathe, before I could find the courage to speak, he kissed me. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was gentle, certain, like it had been waiting years to happen. His lips were soft, tasting of rain and everything we'd left unsaid. For that single heartbeat, the world disappeared, no storm, no promise, no fear. Just us. Two people who'd spent their lives walking a line and had finally stepped over it. I didn't pull away. I couldn't. The moment stretched on, timeless, the kind that felt too fragile to exist outside that tiny wooden boat. When he finally leaned back, his forehead rested against mine, both of us breathing hard, eyes still closed. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, tiny ripples dancing across the lake's surface. "I've wanted to do that for so long," he whispered, his breath mingling with mine. I didn't know what to say. My heart was still racing, my thoughts tangled between panic and peace. Part of me wanted to cry, because it felt too big, too real, too sudden. And yet, another part of me, the quiet, hidden part, felt like it had finally come home. When I opened my eyes, he was smiling. Not the playful, teasing smile I'd grown up with, but something softer, full of relief and fear and something I couldn't name. I touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw, memorizing the feeling because some part of me knew that moments like this didn't last forever. In that single moment, every rule we'd written disappeared. The promise, the lines, the unspoken boundaries, all gone, washed away like the rain that had brought us here. But even as I leaned into him, heart trembling and full, a thought flickered quietly in the back of my mind, the kind that felt too dangerous to say out loud. When the rain stopped, and the real world came rushing back, what would happen to us? For now, though, I let the question drown in the sound of his heartbeat and the fading rain. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about promises or consequences. I was just thinking about him. That evening, the rain faded, leaving behind a sky washed clean, soft and pale, the kind that looks like the world is starting over. The lake had gone still again, smooth as glass, reflecting the last traces of light from the setting sun. The storm had passed, but its memory lingered, in the scent of wet pine, in the quiet ripples on the water, and in the warmth of his hands still laced with mine. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't have to. Words would have ruined it somehow, cheapened something that had already spoken for itself. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore, it was full, of everything we'd both finally stopped pretending not to feel. We just sat there, the wooden boat creaking softly beneath us, our soaked clothes sticking to our skin, our fingers intertwined as if afraid to let go. Every so often, he'd glance at me, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips, the kind that said he knew exactly what I was thinking. And he was right. My mind was spinning, replaying every moment, the storm, his voice, that kiss. It felt like my heart was still out there on the lake, caught somewhere between disbelief and something deeper, something I could finally name. Love. Real, raw, unexpected love. I'd spent years believing our friendship was unshakable because it was safe, because we'd drawn boundaries that protected us from this, from the messiness of feelings that might ruin everything. But sitting there with him, watching the sky shift from gray to gold, I realized safety had never been the point. The point had been him, always him, the boy who waited when I fell behind, who made me laugh when the world felt too heavy, who saw me in ways no one else ever had. When we finally rowed back to shore, the others were inside the cabins, drying off, laughing about the storm. The smell of firewood drifted through the air. Noah helped me out of the boat, his hands steady and warm against mine, and for a moment, I didn't want to let go. He noticed, of course he did, and smiled that quiet, knowing smile again. We walked back in silence, our shoes squelching against the muddy path, the sound strangely comforting. Everything looked the same, the trees, the cabins, the flicker of light from the dining hall windows, but nothing felt the same. Something fundamental had shifted, like the world had tilted ever so slightly, and suddenly, I could see things clearly for the first time. Later that night, lying in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint rhythm of rain still dripping from the eaves. My heart wouldn't calm down. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, the way he looked at me before he kissed me, the way he said my name like it meant something more than it ever had before. I should have been scared. This was everything we'd sworn we wouldn't do. But instead of fear, there was peace. Quiet, absolute peace. He came by in the morning, just as the sun was rising. I was sitting on the porch steps, coffee cup warming my hands, when he sat beside me. For a few seconds, neither of us said a word. Then, without looking at me, he whispered, "So, no regrets?" I smiled, a small, trembling smile. "None." He turned his head then, his eyes meeting mine, and I saw it, that same steady certainty I'd fallen for. "Good," he said softly. "Because I don't want to go back." And just like that, everything we'd been afraid of, the broken promise, the uncertainty, the what-ifs, didn't matter anymore. We'd already crossed the line, and instead of losing what we had, we'd found something deeper. Something stronger. The rest of the weekend passed in a blur, laughter, stolen glances, moments that didn't need to be defined. When the bus pulled away from the lake on the last day, I watched the water disappear behind the trees, the reflection of that storm still lingering somewhere inside me. We didn't tell anyone. There were no grand declarations or public moments. Just quiet understanding, shared smiles, and the feeling of something new growing where fear used to live. That evening, as I walked home, the sky turned a familiar shade of pink, the same color it used to be when we were kids, racing our bikes down the street, chasing sunsets we thought would last forever. But this time, I wasn't chasing anything. For the first time, I felt like I'd arrived. The promise we made was broken, but in its place, something better had begun. Something real. Something ours. And even if it wasn't according to plan, it finally felt right. Sometimes we make promises to protect ourselves, to keep life simple, to build walls around what feels safe. I used to think that was the secret to growing up: control. Keep your head clear, your heart guarded, and everything will make sense. But love doesn't care about sense. It doesn't care about plans, or timing, or the promises you make under mango trees when you're too young to know how deeply life can surprise you. Love sneaks in quietly, slipping through the cracks you didn't even know existed, until one day you look around and realize you've already fallen, not suddenly, but slowly, piece by piece, in every laugh, every glance, every shared silence. Looking back now, I see it all so clearly, the moments that built us. The way Noah would wait when I lagged behind, the way he'd always know what to say when I was falling apart, the way his name alone could soften my mood on the hardest days. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was steady. Familiar. The kind of love that hides inside friendship, pretending it's something else until one day, it stops pretending. For years, I thought our promise was strength. That staying, just friends, was proof of how loyal, how grounded, how mature we were. But the truth is, that promise was fear in disguise, fear of losing what we already had, fear of risking something too good to replace. And yet, all that time, we were already breaking it in small ways. Every smile that lasted too long, every late-night call that stretched past midnight, every moment I found comfort in his voice more than I should have. The heart doesn't wait for permission, it just knows. That day on the lake didn't create our story, it revealed it. The storm didn't start something new, it showed us what had always been there, waiting beneath the surface. The promise didn't shatter in one sudden confession, it had been slowly dissolving, softened by years of quiet affection neither of us dared to name. And maybe that's what love really is, not lightning striking out of nowhere, but a slow, steady rain that changes the landscape without you noticing, until one day the world looks different and you can't remember how it looked before. Sometimes I replay that moment, the rain, the boat, the silence right before he kissed me. I used to wonder if things would have been easier if we'd kept our promise, if we'd just stayed safe inside the walls we built. But the more I think about it, the more I realize how wrong that would have been. Because safety isn't living. It's waiting. And we've been waiting long enough. The truth is, love doesn't follow rules or timelines. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. It arrives when it wants, messy, inconvenient, and absolutely unstoppable. You can fight it, ignore it, pretend it's something else, but eventually, it catches up. It looks you in the eye, drenched in rain, and asks, what if we're breaking the promise for real? And in that moment, every fear, every excuse, every reason not to, fades. Because love, real love, is worth breaking the rules for. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd said no that day, if I'd looked away, if I'd chosen the comfort of what we were instead of the risk of what we could be. Maybe we'd still be friends, still laughing, still hiding. But we wouldn't be us. We'd just be two people pretending not to miss what might have been. Now, when I think of that promise, I don't see failure. I see courage. Because breaking it didn't mean we lost what we had, it meant we were brave enough to let it grow. The friendship didn't disappear, it transformed. It became something deeper, something truer. And maybe that's what love really asks of us, not to replace what came before, but to honor it by becoming something more. If I've learned anything, it's this: the best stories don't begin when we plan them. They begin in the moments we can't explain, the accidental ones, the wrong turns, the quiet confessions under pouring rain. They begin when our hearts stop listening to logic and start listening to truth. We didn't fall in love because it was perfect or convenient. We fell because, somewhere between the laughter and the silence, we found something real, something worth breaking a promise for. And in the end, that's what makes every story worth telling. Because sometimes, the best chapters of your life aren't written by your plans. They're written by your heart, in the rain, in the chaos, and in the moments you finally stop pretending you're not already in love. If this story made you believe that even promises can turn into love, leave a red heart in the comments. Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you have kept the promise, or followed your heart? Subscribe to CineVerse, where every story reminds us that love doesn't always play by the rules. Sometimes, it writes its own.